where food's really powerful is that emotional role in culture. And I think our job is to make not buzz for the sake of buzz, but to make what matters buzzworthy.
In this episode, we're exploring the art and science of brand marketing with Katherine Bond Debicki, CMO of KFC in Canada.
We're spoiled with distinctive assets and firing power. The Colonel, he's not just a guy on our logo. He was our founder. He really is the spirit of the brand. The bucket, 11 herbs and spices, our 3 stripes, and we have the box. There's so many distinctive assets that we leverage with consistency.
How do you prioritize engaging consumers in a conversation, something that you've done, I don't know, in the past year or two?
We ran a campaign when Taylor Swift was visiting on her very famous tour in Canada. We positioned the Colonel as the ultimate fan, sending him to the concerts, handing out food to those waiting in line. And that's what deeply connects and resonates with consumers. And that's what creates conversation and participation.
We'll also hear from Dana Paris, Chief Commercial Officer of Jordan Skinny Mixes, a brand that's proving you don't need decades of history to build fierce customer loyalty.
I think this is a generation where what you do matters more than what you say. And actually what we're seeing, and not just in our industry, in many industries, is
maybe a jumping off point for this is talking about a brand that's well known, an iconic brand. I remember it from when I was a kid as Kentucky Fried Chicken. At some point that became KFC. So where is the brand now in its journey? Very competitive space that was like sort of traditionally fast food, now sort of maybe qualified more QSR space. And there's all kinds of players from different parts of what was traditionally fast food or fast casual come into play. Where is the brand now, and where is it trying to get to in the competitive landscape?
the brand is in a different position depending where you're looking around the world. Globally, we're one of, the most iconic global brands, not just in QSR, but across all brands. We have many, many markets around the world where we're a leading player or the leader in the market. And then we have markets that are more legacy markets like KFC in Canada, where it's a really rich brand, still the fried chicken leader in Canada, but absolutely on a challenger journey for future growth. And to take the strength in all of those powerful memory structures, which you mentioned, we're blessed with this rich legacy and DNA, but find a way to take them out of those memories of the past and put them, firmly into moments of today for our Canadian consumers.
What are some of the assets of the brand that you think about that are the most valuable assets? I mean, that could be the kernel or something like that. It could be like a bucket, which I sort of associate with KFC. I don't know if you still use a lot of buckets and things like that, but like, what are sort of the assets that are important to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we're spoiled with distinctive assets and firing power on those codes as a brand in Canada. I would start first with one of our most distinctive assets being our food, Kentucky Fried Chicken. We have 11 herbs and spices. It's not just a brand code. It's a differentiated and distinctive product that only we have the recipe for. It absolutely builds the brand. And, for us is critical to ensuring we don't play the commodity game of some of the QSR landscape. And then we have the traditional brand assets that just are incredibly powerful for us. The Colonel, as you mentioned, he's not just a guy on our logo or sometimes a character you might see in our advertising. He was our founder. He's not just easily recognizable. He really is the spirit of the brand that we're bringing back to life as that core strength in our tonality moving forward. The bucket, 11 herbs and spices, our 3 stripes. We have the box for our box meals. So just so many distinctive assets that we leverage with consistency and a huge degree of intentionality as we think about how we bring the brand to life externally and internally to our stakeholders.
Chicken or fried chicken or chicken sandwiches, it can be a viral category on social media, right? There are people there's certain sandwiches, and whether those are from, I'll name a couple competitors, but like a Popeyes has a chicken sandwich that suddenly people really get excited about, or Chick-fil-A in some markets becomes important, and some people get passionate about this area. So how does that play into your kind of marketing brand strategy when you have people who, I'll wait in line around the block for this particular item at a certain moment in time?
I mean, I think that's our job, right? We need to give these distinctive brand assets, some of those for people who know them, some for people who might not be familiar. We need to give them meaning and relevance again today. Our goal isn't to walk away from them. It's to inject them with modernity and cultural relevance. And I think that stems into our food as well. And you mentioned competitors. I would say food in general, it plays a functional role, but where food's really powerful is that emotional role in culture. And I think our job is to make not buzz for the sake of buzz, but to make what matters buzzworthy. And how we do that is a critical way of how we recapture that share of mind and share of relevance amongst our consumers.
What is sort of unique about the Canadian landscape that might be different than, for a global brand like KFC around the world?
Yeah, I think North America in general has a hyper competitive landscape within the world of QSR. US has its own distinct set of competitors. We share some of those. Canada, as you mentioned, has its own unique competitive set, some of which are born and bred in Canada. Like Tim's, as you mentioned, we would say KFC, it is a legacy brand in Canada. We were the second market or the first market that the Colonel ever expanded to post the US. And then you have global brands entering our market as well. I think our job from a competitive set perspective is to really understand our brand, our growth strategy, stay consistent on there. I love the verbiage that you look to your competitors for information, not inspiration. And I think that's really critical, especially from a KFC standpoint, when we do have that very distinctive and powerful brand codes, and that fried chicken leadership position in this market. Our goal is to continue to maintain that leadership, to grow it, and to make fried chicken more relevant in more occasions to Canadians.
How do you prioritize mass market channels, more targeted channels, the role of TV versus the role of digital? How do you think about your marketing mix?
It's a great question, and I think everyone battles against this. My belief is, as we think about relevance today, especially, and you mentioned earlier, that next generation of consumer, how we reintroduce them, even in some instances, to the brand. I think this is a generation where what you do matters more than what you say. And so it's pushing us even further than looking at the media mix and really thinking about how we bring the brand to life in actionable ways for consumers. Not just to entertain them, but to engage them, to create conversation and participation. And then how do you use that more traditional kind of channel mix to bring that to life and to scale the reach behind it?
What would be an example of that, like of sort of engaging consumers in a conversation, something that you've done, I don't know, in the past year or two?
In Canada, we've had a lot of success. And as we think about how we modernize this brand, really trying to anchor ourselves in action as much as we anchor ourselves in communications. Recently, we ran a campaign when Taylor Swift was visiting on her very famous tour in Canada, and we positioned the Colonel as the ultimate fan. And it wasn't just through communications or product development and promotional planning. It was about putting him at the heart of the fan culture, aligning with key codes within that culture, like the friendship bracelet, sending him to the concerts, handing out, food to those waiting in line. And I think that's what shows that you're not just pushing your goods, your brands, your services, but you're really connecting with a generation in a way that still connects with your brand and keeps you true to your business and brings kind of cultural relevancy to your core.
KFC's approach to brand engagement is all about tapping into cultural moments, like the Taylor Swift tour, to create real connections with their audience. But in a different space, brands are also leveraging social media in powerful ways. Skinny Mixes, known for its range of low-calorie, sugar-free syrups and drink mixes, has built a dedicated following through digital-first marketing. Ben shifts focus for a moment to discuss that strategy with Dana Paris, Chief Commercial Officer of Jordan Skinny Mixes.
What are the key ways that you sort of reach consumers? I know that, I think when we've chatted before, you've said there's been 2 billion views, 2 billion with a B, views of products and recipes on TikTok. A lot deal with sort of specialty niche communities. For instance, community that's into drinking water, hydration, maybe losing weight. Is that your most important channel? Are there other channels? How do you just think about kind of like your marketing mix and how you get the brand out there?
We're a social first brand. 40% of our consumers discover us through a social channel. We have over 5,000 creators creating content on our behalf across TikTok, Instagram, even Facebook, which sounds, a little bit archaic, but we have these really amazing Facebook private groups that are fanatical about our products. And that's really where we have these amazing community forums where people share recipes, how-tos, different inspiration, different hacks that have worked through them, through whatever their goals are. And so, yeah, our most important channels are in social. We have really shifted our focus, right, with TikTok, with all of the kind of the trepidation over the last several months with TikTok, and then even, this past weekend, right? We've had to shift our focus and adapt and encourage our creators to adapt as well. As we're uncertain where that platform's going. But yeah, social has been our most important platform. I suspect it will continue to be. We'll just have to continue to get more creative about what platform our consumer finds us on.
For the quick service restaurant industry, or QSR, we've chatted in the past. You've mentioned that, it's not just the traditional pillars of convenience and value anymore, that it's also based on experience. What do you mean by experience? Do you mean physical experience in a store? Do you mean the digital experience? Do you mean at a Taylor Swift concert? That's part of the experience too. Like, what do you mean by experience playing a more important role, now it should, in sort of QSR?
I would just say contextually, when you look at the origins of QSR, it was really built off of the fundamentals of convenience and value. And the first time that was really disrupted was the invention of the drive-through. And that wasn't adding a new layer, it was really shifting and expanding the role of convenience within QSR. The next wave of disruption that you often might see is the digital disruption. And that's what's predominantly taken a huge amount of conversation around the industry over the last few years. And definitely is still a disruption that we're all working through today.
Just because that drive-through window was super important, but now if someone wants something sort of quick and fast, you're not just competing with other QSR restaurants. You could be competing with their neighborhood restaurant delivered by, at least in the US, DoorDash or Uber Eats or something else actually competes with KFC in some regard.
Exactly. And that digital disruption convenience is totally redefined. You're playing in the digital food court, and the wealth of options that consumers have has expanded rapidly. And also, for other brands, the ability to expand your reach without expanding your physical footprint, which can have restrictions from a CapEx perspective, is being unlocked. So it's added a really unique dynamic to the industry, and not one that's just about convenience. It's also about data and how you reach people and target, and how you offer them more of what they want in a more convenient manner.
So that's the second. So you had drive-through, you have digital disruption, and you were kind of taking us further beyond that to experience.
Yeah, and in our conversation sharing, I think that the next wave we're really seeing as an industry is experience disruption. And that's really built off the fact that consumer expectations continue to grow for QSR, whether that is stemming from increased options, the merger of fast food and fast casual, redefining what fast food expectations are and how we serve up good in every bite. And what that means is, as an industry, we now need to figure out how to deliver on convenience value, digital being part of that, but also elevate our experience. And, my firm belief is, as marketers, one of our biggest parts of our jobs as we look to the future is not just how we build the brand on the outside of the business, it's how we put the brand at the heart of the business to really guide distinctive and relevant experiences through our guests through their journey. And that absolutely might play a role in how we design our restaurants, how they look, how they feel, how they sound, how you order. But it also might play equally as big of a role in how we engage with our team members and build them as brand ambassadors, not just a team member, and bring them at the heart of the brand building journey. And so my belief is, as marketers, we're really challenged more than ever to think 360 about how we build our brand, how we drive growth. And to do that, we need to have clarity on who our brand is and what are those insights that are meaningful to our guests.
How do you think about the positioning of a brand in this sort of QSR space? I sort of see it, I see brands like there's sort of a pull to really define what you are. Meaning there's some brands that be like, okay, we're healthy options, we're mindful, we're sustainable, where there's sort of that road. And then I see a pull for the other direction saying, we're crave worthy, we're craveable, we're not playing any of that. We are just like about like, we taste great. And I sort of see, and then you don't see that many, it seems like as much anymore, where you would have more of like, oh, here's our healthy menu, and here's our, sort of unhealthy menu that tastes super great, and here's our others. Like, do you find that kind of there's a need to define yourself in kind of a core way just to make the brand message get through? Or does it still work to kind of be, we have different segments, and here's our people who are going to eat salads, and here's our people who are going to eat fried chicken patties in a waffle, and they can coexist in a KFC?
Yeah, I think what all brands have learned, and we've definitely learned, is people don't fit in boxes like they do in the traditional segmentation model, right? You're not a salad person or a double down person necessarily. A lot of those lines blur. You might have cluster like patterns. And I think the key part that helps us really uncover and balance where our brand sits and maintaining integrity there while still maximizing that relevance is, one, having clarity on your brand role and position in the market. But then two, really leaning into the power of consumer insight, and not just doing things necessarily because they're trendy, but what do your guests want, and how do you have clear diagnosis around your business, how it's performing in your consumer segments or your consumer audience to guide you on what is needed. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer for all brands. I definitely don't think that consumers fall into these neat boxes that we desperately want them to because it makes our lives a bit easier. I do think the answer is a combination of clarity on your brand positioning and then really strong kind of insights to action on your business and brand diagnosis to guide how you evolve and stay relevant.
What brands do you admire? What brands do you think, other marketing leaders, including yourself at KFC, could learn from?
Oh, I just think there's so many brands to admire for many different reasons around the world right now. I really admire brands that have disrupted categories that were primed for a little bit of a cultural shift injection. So you have brands like Knix, who went into kind of the underwear business and redefined underwear through the lens of a woman and what they need. I think they've done an incredible job. Often quoted as liquid death. I mean, you have to admire the courageousness and the boldness that they've put on that brand.
I mean, for a sparkling water called Liquid Death that goes against counter to everything in its competitors.
The courage that they've displayed and the consistency with that courage, which I think is really important. It's relatively easy to be courageous in a moment, to be consistent on the courage and to be true to your brand. I think they've just done exceptionally well. You then have, some airline brands who I think have just done a really good job in hospitality, redefining how they grow post kind of disruption of the travel aggregator business. And they are to be admired from a kind of data and loyalty end, and really pushing on how they leverage loyalty, not just to unlock discounting, but to unlock experience elevation. So the list goes on and on. I think we can find so many learnings outside of our industry and outside of the traditional competitives that we look at.
What do you think that people miss that would be wise to pay attention to in the industry?
Oh, great question. I mean, I'd love to hear what you think people miss. I think we hear time and time again, in particular over the last year, how does QSR maintain its value equation for people and that role for people within their consumption? It sounds boring, but it's so important. It's a critical part of why people come to our industry, and access and affordable access to food, and even in those treat me moments, is critical for us to hold on to. So I think that is just such a clear ask of consumers of our industry, and one that we're all working towards delivering. And value will continue to be a critical part of this game. And there's the price value, and then there's the kind of overall value we offer our guests. I think as well, people really do want adventure and a little bit of escapism in their food. I said it earlier, food absolutely plays a functional role, but really, for many of us, food is an emotional game, and allowing people to have that sense of escapism or relief, especially in a world where there's a lot going on and we've been through huge amounts of disruption.
And it can be an affordable luxury too, in the sense of whether you're in a restaurant or you're in a supermarket, if you want to splurge, you can kind of splurge and you're not going to break the bank. And there's other things. You can't really walk in a car dealership and splurge. It's going to be a financial issue for you. But there you can kind of follow a whim and do something. And there's benefits that aside from the meal that you're having.
And we hear all about like that little treat culture where you want that little reward for yourself for whatever reason it might be. And I think that food plays that role. QSR plays that role. And then beyond the kind of product, the service offering, I think people want to be entertained again. From a comms perspective, I think our consumers are looking for a brand that surprises, that delights, that is, more of the pull into their world than a push of messaging out there. And we're all, craving that entertainment and escapism, not just in product, but in communications and how we can bring those pockets of joy and, fun to people's everyday.
From indulgence in food to indulgence in flavor, the idea of treating yourself plays a key role in how brands connect with consumers. Now, with that in mind, Ben turns back to Dana Paris to discuss how Skinny Mixes taps into the emotional side of their products.
What do brands miss about this sort of guilt-free indulgence space, if I was going to give it a name? Functional versus taste versus just overall emotional of feeling like you're doing something better for yourself.
Skinny Mixes always stood for great tasting product, right? It was every consumer tells us that they love the taste of our product, which is great. And we have over 100 different flavors and continually are innovating and dropping 20 to 30 new flavors a year to continue to excite them. And we actually listen to what they want and create it for them. So taste is always going to be number one for our consumer and for our products. Being sugar-free is the reason to believe behind our brand. I mean, that is why they pick us up. They're looking for something that's going to help them on whatever journey they're on. But I think where we really have thought about, and, this is kind of the harder evolution of a brand, is how do you emotionally connect with the consumer? It's easy to, have a very functional benefit as well as a great tasting product. But then to make it be about the brand connection with that consumer is much harder and much harder to replicate, right? It helps create a real point of difference and kind of that brand love. And so for us, that's where this brand purpose has been really important. And for us, it's about celebrating these me moments. And what we've learned through our deep consumer listening is they don't buy these products for anybody else in their household. They don't share these products with their husband, with their kids, with their daughters necessarily. They buy them for them. They take those 5 minutes in the morning to create their perfect coffee or unwind at the end of the night with their perfect cocktail. And it's about that 5-minute me moment just for them. That's a really lovely, elevated experience that they can create on the go or at home. And it's approachable and it's achievable for them. And so that's where we've really started to hone in on, is that more emotional connection to what that feels like.
Is there a marketing channel that maybe isn't your most important one today, but you think in 3 years it could be really much more important? Or what do you think is that we're sort of ignoring now that will just, should be increasingly on the top of the radar?
I mean, I think there's so many. I think we're really seeing this resurgence of the power of our owned assets as a marketing channel, especially with growth in data and our ability to be more insightful about how we speak with our guests. And with the digitization of our owned assets, both kind of in your traditional digital environments, but now in a digitized bricks and mortar model, how can we leverage those to surprise, to delight, to more easily convert guests and give them what they want, is going to be an incredibly exciting space, and one that, when you're not in the industry, you might not think of top of mind, but is one that is just ripe for a massive evolution in how we speak to people. And then externally, I think you're going to see a lot of continued growth in things like connected TV, in kind of the idea of acts and how brands think about earned creative and not just paid creative as a differentiator. not just because it allows challenger brands to have greater share of mind or share of voice, because it really connects with audiences. And even brands with the big budgets should be looking at how they engage differently with an increasingly skeptical younger generation who don't want to just hear from you. They want to be part of your world and engage with you.
And I think when you start thinking about earned, I mean, what's nice about it as sort of a precursor to maybe more paid, once you find something that really works, is that it forces you to do things like really be like timely, right? Really, we call it calendar-based marketing. What's happening now? Really be relevant. And you can't sort of hide it with a big enough ad buy. So you have to do that first. But then when you find something that works, that's great. Now you're like, let's amplify it. Let's do a strategic ad buy or something paid to just get it more places because we already know it performs well. And sometimes if you have too much paid in there at the beginning, you can't see all the pieces because is that the ad buy or is that people really engaging?
Absolutely. And I think you've seen a lot of examples of where people are partnering with these kind of culture moments or culture creators. And in, the past, we would have thought of that as brand over time work, right? And actually what we're seeing, and not just in our industry, in many industries, is that is driving sales overnight. When you are connecting your core and your brand to these culture moments or kind of culture connectors, you're seeing that drive growth and returns, immediately as well as over time. So I think it's such an exciting area for marketers to play in, to get connected to. I think, again, you need to make sure you're not chasing the buzz. It's about making what matters buzzy and being clear on that from a strategic end, but it's right for us to continue to explore, to test and learn. And I also think often that's where we have a little bit more courage, even in brands with massive budgets, because that's where you might think there's less risk and you can play and you can push the boundaries and then start to amplify and get more confident through your marketing mix on what's working, what's connecting. And I think that's just a beautiful gift that it allows us as marketers and creators within the industry.
Well, and I think sometimes too, the data piece that you mentioned can be more connected to creative or campaigns. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, we've done a lot of work for, I think you have it in Canada, Laffy Taffy, the candy brand that has the joke on the inside. One of the things in our work that just came from our sort of data insights work was that people were super polarized about banana flavor Laffy Taffy. Like it was a thing, right? Like either you hate it or you love it. And the brand could, run away from that and just say like, only people love it, right? I don't even know about the haters. But instead, from that sort of insight where we said, let's build a campaign around, are you team banana or are you team no banana? And let's embrace that this is a polarizing flavor and you could, sort of pick your side and battle. And no, this is the greatest thing ever. No, that's the worst thing I've ever tasted. And let's just amplify that. And that's an example of a whole creative and influencer and seasonal campaign all derived from what was essentially just a marketing insight observation that was some, useful part for the brand. So I think there's this opportunity for have like different divisions, departments. Data insights doesn't have to only be for just like your targeting work of consumer or defining the need state. It could lead into creative.
Absolutely. And I actually think the best creative often has data and insight because that's what deeply connects and resonates with consumers. And that's what creates conversation and participation, right? And that is ultimately what makes it modern and engaging and punch above its weight. And I couldn't agree more. I think there's so much opportunity for us. And, the only risk being, I think everyone feels so overwhelmed by data. It gets into like the analysis paralysis. And it's about what are you trying to look for? And how do you create that fodder or kind of sparks of interest from an insight end to really spearhead opportunities, whether they be through communications, product innovation, menu segmentation. But the best work often is grounded in a really compelling and true insight.
As marketing evolves, predicting the next big platform is never easy. Just a few years ago, TikTok wasn't even on the radar for many brands. So where is digital marketing headed next? Ben asks Dana Paris for her take on the future of brand engagement.
What marketing channel do you believe will play a much larger role in the next 3 years?
Hard to predict because I would have never said that TikTok would be our number one platform 3 years ago, right? So it's very hard for me to predict. I'm sure I won't even know what the platform is that we're going to be on in 3 years. But I have found a renewed passion to get back to YouTube. I think that can be a great place, especially for short format videos, which I think consumers are really gravitating towards and can be a great platform for us. And, I think it was some marketers have stepped away a little bit over the last 10 years, maybe less than that, maybe 8 years from YouTube as a main platform. But I think that it can be a very powerful storytelling platform.
To wrap up, I'd love to get your take on, just as a marketing leader, and I should mention, again, your title, it's Chief Marketing Officer, but it has digital and technology in there as well. Across your professional life, what has been the best advice you've received?
Oh my gosh. I've been really, really lucky to have many great mentors, coaches along the way. I think 4 pieces of advice probably stand out to me. Ultimately, no one owns it more than you, right? And so how do you really get grounded in that and leverage yourself and back yourself in your own growth journey? I think the second piece of advice and learning I have is that your role or opportunity will be as big or as small as you make it. So how do you think through that kind of creator lens and make opportunities bigger? And that will just suit you through your career into leadership. And then I think third, great leaders create great leaders. And I think gone are the days where great leaders are about dictating and kind of micromanaging. It is really about creating great leaders to expand impact. And then lastly, just have fun on the journey, right? Like achieving can be done through many ways, but achieving through striving means you suck the fun out of it for yourself and for everyone else. And the best work, the best teams, I think have fun through the challenges together. And at the end of the day, that's going to be what creates that sense of stability and removes the risk of complacency because you're always going to be energized to move forward.
And what about the flip side? What is the worst advice? What have people told you along the way that others would be wise not to follow?
Oh, I've been so fortunate. Some of the worst advice that I've heard of probably hasn't been given to me are people saying things like, you're not here to be heard, you're here to just learn. I think that's a risk we make as we coach people because then they don't properly gain confidence with the seat at the table. I honestly think that's risk we take as leaders because we are not looking for the fresh eyes and a different perspective on the challenges we're working through. So for me, that dynamic is just, a lose-lose for everyone around the table.
Well, and actually, one of the best ways to learn, if you're just from the point of view of learning, is actually you have to output things. It's not just like internalizing, taking notes, writing it down. You have to like apply it. So definitely, you're just here to listen and learn is not a great way to learn, but maybe to your point, there's more you can contribute.
And it just instills a culture of fear. And for me, fear is the biggest barrier to progress. And I think there's just so many ramifications of that adage in the industry.
And final question for you is, if you had a magic wand and you could do one thing to change, it could be KFC, it could be the QSR industry, it could be something else overnight. You're sort of emperor for a day in this. What would you change? What would you implement that you think would make such a difference if you had the power to do that?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we're all battling with is less a what, it's more of a how. I would fast forward the how we work together and look at kind of bridging the divide between traditional functions, roles, responsibilities. For my title, it's really about how we start to integrate digital technology and marketing with consumer and brand at the heart to drive business impact. And I think fast forwarding and being able to accelerate that learning journey of how we make the systems harmonize would be my wand. Remove the technical debt, harmonize our systems, and then really be able to accelerate our growth through the incredible culture of collaboration that we have today.
Well, there you have it. Katherine Bond Debicki, Chief Marketing, Digital, and Technology Officer for KFC Canada. Thanks so much for the insights and what a fun brand to play with, and best wishes for continued success.
Thank you. It was awesome to chat to you today.